Streaming free anywhere you want. The fragile ceasefire in Gaza is holding for now. Despite challenges this morning, Israel said one of 4 bodies handed over by Hamas yesterday is not a hostage. Israel has threatened to restrict aid supplies into Gaza over the slow return of the bodies. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Deborah Patta has more from Jerusalem. Hamas is slowly releasing the bodies of hostages still in Gaza, a total of 7 so far, which has angered families waiting for their loved ones. We spoke to hostage negotiator Gershon Baskin, who told us sadly some bodies may never be recovered. He said many of the Hamas commanders who buried the Israeli hostages were killed by Israel. There are also thousands of Gazans who are unaccounted for beneath the rubble of buildings bombed by the Israeli military. The Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics says more than 11,000 people are still missing in Gaza. First responders are searching for the dead, but it is not easy when over 90% of the buildings have been damaged or destroyed and there are only the most rudimentary tools available. As Gaza starts to think of rebuilding, the U.S. peace deal calls for an interim governing body headed by President Trump to run the territory that ultimately will hand control over to Palestinian rule. But that body has not been established yet, and Hamas has stepped into the vacuum, allegedly targeting Palestinians accused of collaborating with Israel. Baskin said there are gangs empowered by Israel who were involved in illegal activities before the war, who have been empowered as an alternative to Hamas. President Trump said, and I quote, "That didn't bother me too much, to be honest with you. The Palestinian Authority has condemned the Hamas executions as extrajudicial killings, calling them heinous crimes, and called for the restoration of law in Gaza and a return to legitimate Palestinian rule." Meanwhile, Israelis have been gathering for the funeral procession of deceased hostage Guy Luz, whose body was returned by Hamas on Monday. In a CBS News exclusive, our Tony Dokoupil joined Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he visited some of the freed Israeli hostages in the hospital. Then the two discussed several issues. We met the Prime Minister just outside of Tel Aviv at Rabin Medical Center shortly after sundown, and we watched as he and the First Lady Sarah visited with newly released hostages and their now intact families. But we also looked ahead beyond the current ceasefire and beyond even Israel's border to Palestinians' future. Who is going to govern Gaza? The only names mentioned are Donald Trump and Tony Blair. Is Tony Blair going to be the president of Gaza? I doubt it, but I think that this is a transitional period and we want to fashion a governance that works, that is not made of people who are committed to our destruction, because if we put them there, then we'll just repeat it again and again. We don't want to have the October 7th massacre repeated. How do you deradicalize a population in Gaza that wants to fight? You've got thousands of young men who have just spent 2 years during a brutal war or fighting in this brutal war, and on the back of that, generations of struggle. I think you have to understand that Gaza is not uniform. There are Gazans who are fighting Hamas and are saying we don't want this anymore. A lot of people in Gaza now know that Hamas has brought catastrophic consequences to them because of its fanaticism. The most important thing in destroying fanaticism is to destroy a certain hope, the hope that the fanaticism will achieve its results. When people know Israel is here to stay, you're not going to destroy the Jewish state. One thing we didn't touch on is the latest apparent disruption in Palestinian aid, because that bit of news broke after our conversation, but we covered a lot, including the politics of the recent speech by President Trump at the Israeli parliament and the ribbing he gave Prime Minister Netanyahu, or appeared to anyway, about him not being easy to work with. He hopes that President Trump would say that, the Prime Minister said, because when it comes to Israel and the Jewish people, he intends to be tough. I want to bring in Tom Heinrich, an Israeli journalist and the former spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She was working for the Prime Minister when the previous ceasefire agreement was negotiated under President Biden. What was different this time around? We also had a ceasefire in place before October 7, 2023. What's different now is that Israelis will no longer accept a fake sense of calm and quiet. We're not naive about it, not anymore. Our security is not something that we take for granted. I can tell you what Israelis want to see next happening in Gaza. We want to see Hamas disarming and relinquishing power. We want to see the Trump plan, the Trump deal in its entirety, the full 20 points being carried out thoroughly. We have trust in our leadership and in your leadership, President Trump, that they will see it through. Without that, and without the first clause mentioned in this interview, the first point in the plan is the deradicalization of Palestinian society in Gaza. Without that plan, I can guarantee that you and I are just going to have this conversation again, maybe a few years down the road, a few months down the road. Palestinian children who learn that they have no hope in life because there is a Jewish state and that they should aspire to kill Jews and kidnap others. Something has to change, and there is a big opportunity right now. I want to play a little more of that interview with Tony and the Prime Minister about what a future in Gaza could look like. Take me into the future. Paint me a picture of when this is over. What will it take for you to say it's done and we've won? For the foreseeable future, not only for Israel but for the free world and for the civilized world, you have to maintain your ability to defend yourself, because freedom is not permanent nor is it automatic. If you cannot defend free societies, there will be an overtaking by authoritarian or totalitarian regimes. Also in that interview, Tony asked the Prime Minister about a possible two-state solution. Ultimately, Israelis would like to see some level of sovereignty for the Palestinian territories, but not one that would threaten the existence of the State of Israel. Who do you see, for example, as a viable option? The Palestinian Authority has in recent years grown corrupt, but since the horrific attack on October 7 they were able to maintain some level of control and discipline in the West Bank. They may be seen by some Palestinians as illegitimate, but isn't it better than following Hamas, which has led to the destruction of so many lives over the last 2 years? Just last week, the IDF thwarted a shipment from Iran in the so-called West Bank with rockets, anti-tank missiles and weapons. There are terror elements there already trying to plan the next October 7 massacre. The reason why they weren't able to do so is because Israel has some overriding security access there to make sure they can't rearm and regroup the same way Hamas did in Gaza. October 7 didn't happen because the Palestinians didn't have a state. It's because they did, and we can't allow failing terror states. The Prime Minister said that Palestinians down the road should have the powers to govern themselves but none of the powers that could threaten Israel. That's something he said before October 7, and most Israelis stand behind it, even more so now. It's a transitional period with the deal we have in place right now, a huge opportunity. During it, we want the involvement of moderate Arab states who went through processes of deradicalization to gradually take over as per the Trump plan. There are elements in Gaza resisting Hamas rule. We've seen horrific videos of Palestinians trying to resist, but they're caught in the middle and we don't want to see mass public executions by Hamas. What is your message to those folks who are caught in the middle and say we don't want this, but we also don't want to be attacked by the Israelis either? Pretty soon they're going to have a big opportunity with a commitment from Israel, the United States, and various Muslim Arab states who are also involved in this plan. Just hang in there and Hamas will be no more. This is what we promised ourselves and what we promised them. We need a better future in the region and we know that there are committed people on the other side dedicated to this idea.